Danish, who has graciously agreed to lead this webinar on how India should be prepared for COVID-19 third wave. Dr. Salim will elaborate more about it for us and highlight crucial aspects that are necessary to establish a good practice. In order to some context to the webinar, I'll start off by introducing you to the MedPiper technologies and highlight our objectives and briefly explain the flow of the events. Some of you present here today might be aware of MedPiper and the work we do, but to those who are new, MedPiper is a health tech company that uses technology to create and to connect doctors and healthcare professionals with hospitals and healthcare organizations for duty vacancies, clinical assignments, and partnerships. Our platform helps doctors with resources to enhance their professional skills and network with fellow peers in the medical field. Our objective is to explore and grant access to as many opportunities as possible for practitioners. And given the current popularity in telemedicine, we thought it will be a great opportunity to see that how COVID-19 is preparing us for the third wave, including the experiences of learned individuals with the requisite knowledge in this space, and at the same time strengthen the channel for the benefit of the doctor and within our network. With that, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Salim. Thank you so much for joining us today for this session. And just before I hand the session over to you, I would like my colleague, Ms. Kritika, to introduce Dr. Salim to the audience.
Thank you so much, Sagarika.
Thank you.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you all for today's session. My name is Kritika Jaiswal. I'm the social media manager at MedPiper. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who's going to talk on how India can combat COVID-19 third wave in regards to the healthcare system of India. A speaker is an expert from the field of medicine and served various designations as the Kerala State Secretary and National Innovation Head Society for Emergency Medicine India, Vice President, Indian Medical Association, Kovalam, HOD and Academic Director at PRS Hospital, Trivandrum, and Senior Specialist at Abu Dhabi Health Authority. He has received prestigious award for Center of Excellence in Emergency Medicine 2015 from the Society of Emergency Medicine India. Not only this, but is also appreciated for his efforts in emergency first aid training. More than 10,000 people established Kerala's first railway emergency room, and for the launch of South Kerala's first bike ambulance. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Danish Salim for the session today. Dr. Danish, we shall proceed with the session.
Okay, just 1 minute. So thanks MedPiper for giving me an opportunity to speak here. So let us discuss few important points. Just 1 minute. Connecting to
Doctor, unmute, doctor.
Oh, you are not hearing. Okay, sorry. So thanks MedPiper for giving me an opportunity to speak here. So we have received some questions regarding the COVID-19 third wave and how to handle this third wave, whether it is an inevitable, all those questions. So we will discuss few important topics, like maybe I selected 8 or 9 topics. We will discuss that, and then later on we will discuss your questions, and I'll try to answer the questions. So I'm just starting with the questions which I have received. Just I'll take it one by one. So just listen to the topics which I'm going to discuss, and if I'm not able to cover all the questions, then you can start. So the first question which we have received is whether this third wave is inevitable or not, or when can we expect this third wave, or what all things we can do to prevent this third wave. So these are the common questions which everybody have in their mind. So let us discuss what is the reason for the third wave. So COVID-19 continued relentlessly for the last 1.5 years, but in every geography, there have been periods of surge that have been followed by a relatively fall or lull. In India, so far there have been 2 very distinct periods of surge. separated by a prolonged lull period. So the national curve seems to have ended a declining phase right now. So that means we are in a declining phase. So the May 660 has increased. So from the last 1 month, the count has dropped very much. So the third wave of COVID-19 pandemic in India is inevitable because the lot of populations are still susceptible. There are many reasons why I am explaining, I am telling. First important is huge population is still susceptible and unvaccinated. As the unlocking of COVID-19 related restrictions have started already across the country. So we can expect there is a huge challenge is there because the susceptible population is a huge and unvaccinated population is huge. The vaccination is not enough to stop the third wave because around 6 to 8% of India's population has been vaccinated with 2 doses of COVID-19 vaccine. So there is still a lot of population. So the India is targeting the vaccination of around 100 crore people over the 138 crore people in the country by the end of 2021. So still we have a big susceptible population. The second reason are there are antibody escape mutant viruses. First, you have to know how do this antibody work. So antibodies are produced by the immune cells called plasma cells as the first line of defense against the infections. So they are secreted into the human body, especially into the bloodstream when they recognize the antigens and the toxins. And then what will happen? It will inactivate these vaccines or the viruses. So this is called neutralization. So when the COVID-19 virus mutate, it can be non-synonymous. That means the protein encoded would be altered and different from the non-mutated form. So the person will be infected with COVID-19 even if they have enough amount of antibody. This is called escape antibody. This is another main reason for the third wave. So this is inevitable. We have to expect this. So when we have to accept within 2 to 3 months from the second wave, we have to expect. So the second question is, which antibody is good? Natural antibody or the vaccine-induced antibody is good? So what you have to know, the vaccines are much higher in producing the antibody when you compare with the natural infection. And thus you have to know, because the vaccines are producing more amount of antibody when you compare with a natural infection. So natural immunity from the coronavirus is fortunately quite strong if the infection is very high. For example, if the patient needs a ventilator, if the patient is very sick, the antibodies are very, very nice and it will fight against the following infection. But most of the people who are only mildly ill or the immune protection, so in those patients, the immune protection can be prevent a second infection, may wane within a few months. For example, 2 or 3 months, it will have the antibodies. Then the people will be benefited more from the vaccine than others would. So this is the answer for whether the natural immunity or the vaccine protects. Third question, how to prevent the third wave in India? So first of all, you have to know a century ago, a virulent flu virus called the swine flu, not swine flu, the what is it called? What is the infection in 1918? So that infection, around like 15 million people have died actually. So we have to clearly understand that this COVID, the pandemic is not over. The first is on Spanish flu. The first is on deciding when and where to ease the lockdown and restrictions on movement and activities that now cover most parts of the country. For example, some states and union territories have decided to ease the lockdown. So depending upon the total positivity rate, so you have to announce the plans and deadlines according to the total positivity rate in the state or the union territories. So you have to check various parameters for that. It is simply the proportion of the eligible population in a area which has been susceptible for the infection. So this we have to closely monitor and decide on whether to ease the lockdown or give some restrictions, all those things. The second important thing, which is related to the first, is to keep pushing ahead with the vaccination program. So in terms of approving more vaccines, we have to go forward in approving more vaccines, delivering capacity with the immediate target being covered of at least 40% of the entire eligible population as soon as possible. So that's the most important point in covering, reducing the third wave. So many vaccines are given under the age of 18 years, and so not above the 18 years. So target should be covering 40% of the entire population. So we have to start giving to the people who are less than 18 years also. You have to know the Israel have given around 62% of the population. US had given 51%, Canada, UK around 58%. Even the Brazil has current around 22%. So broadly speaking, the population, you have to cover at least 40% of the India's population to reduce the speed of this COVID infection. So that you have to know. So you have to categorize the people again. Those who have got already COVID infection. The category B, those who have not been infected. So within this category B, you have to select a small subset of high-risk population. For example, there are potential super spreaders, which we can call the category C. Though the category C includes street vendors, auto rickshaw drivers, then milk and vegetable vendors, newspaper vendors, so journalists, those who are interacting with other people, restaurant workers, fuel pump attendant. So these people who are actually getting interacted with many people, you have to start vaccinating first. So that's how you have to, because they are interacting with people, and they can be infected and they can infect other people very fastly. So you have to give importance. So priority should be given to those people who can be a super spreaders. And second priority should be given to comorbidities people with 18 to 45 age group. So we can reduce the number of deaths. So this is also another important point. The third is to link the stringency of the non-pharmaceutical interventions in place in district to the proportion of the population. For example, you have to calculate the total positivity rate, and you have to framework to decide when to open, when to restrict certain areas. For example, in an area, you can say from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. you can go and relax. For another area, you can decide on another time. So it may not still make sense to allow a large religious, cultural, or social events now, including the weddings. You have to restrict because crowding should be stopped. So as a conclusion, the state should decide which activity they will curtail in case of a flare-up in infection. So they have to closely monitor the total positivity rate and the infection. The fourth is to enhance the surveillance, including the sequencing enough viral genomes to identify the potential threats from new variants. For example, the Delta variants are very much in concern now. So now the Delta plus variant has come. So you have to know which is more infectious, and you have to act according to this knowledge. For instance, the UK, which earlier this week celebrated 0 death from COVID-19 infection for the first time since the last 1 year. So this we have to take it in, like they are monitoring it very closely. So we have to check the latest strain, how powerful it is, how fast it is spreading, and whether any other new strains are developed. The fifth, ultimately, the key control to prevent the infection is you have to understand that the public have to understand that it is not over. We know that it is human behavior that causes such waves. So these waves are not coming to us, but rather they are originating from us because of we do not listen to the advices which are given through these government officials. So disease transmission can be halted by changes in human behavior. All sections of the population need to understand what should be followed to prevent the COVID-19 infection, what you have to do, maintain for the COVID-19 appropriate behavior. We will not see a devastating third wave if you collectively act responsibly. So the antidote to third COVID wave is combination of social distancing, proper masking, and avoiding the crowds as much as possible. So this is regarding the how to prevent a third wave in India. Now, fourth question is antibody cocktail treatment. So antibody cocktail treatment is a game changer. So India granted emergency use authorization to Region Co on May 4th, around the peak of the country's second wave. So what is this REGEN-COV? It is casirivimab and imdivimab. Both are monoclonal antibodies that make up the antibody cocktail, which binds specifically to the different site of the coronary spike protein, blocking the viral attachment and entry into the human cells. So this drug is meant for patients who are risk of developing severe COVID-19 infections. So those who are receiving oxygen, we are not giving. So high viral load is usually present in the first 7 days of the symptom onset. Hence, this medicine is best given within the first 7 days of the symptom onset. So monoclonal antibodies are laboratory-made proteins that mimic the immune system's ability to fight off this harmful pathogen, such as the viruses. So they are specifically directed against the spike protein of the novel coronavirus. So we think that it will be beneficial. So results released from UK in June 16, described as the world's largest trial of COVID-19 therapeutics, demonstrated that this REGEN-COV reduced the risk of death even when given to patients hospitalized with a severe COVID-19 infection. So currently we are giving this REGEN-COV for people who are not dependent on oxygen. But the main problem is the cost, because a single dose of this cocktail comprising 600 milligram of each antibody, it cost around 60,000 Indian rupees, around $1,000. So it is beyond the reach of many Indian families. So that's the most important drawback of this cocktail. So next question is new oral drug in the pipeline, which are promising to the population. So the Drug Control General of India, the DCGA, has approved an anti-COVID oral drug for emergency use as an adjuvant therapy in moderate to severe COVID-19 patient. You might have known it. So it is called as 2-deoxy-2-glucose, 2-DG. It is a drug developed and has proved to be beneficial in the third phase trial of COVID-19 patient, which is conducted in India. So drugs comes in a powder form, in a sachet, easy to take orally by dissolving it in water. So currently around 10,000 to 1 lakh product has been released. So we are waiting for the final report. Then another drug is called molnupiravir. So it is also in trial. It is found effective in animal trials. So if the human data shows a similar antiviral effect, it may be suitable for use as an orally administered pill following the exposure to COVID virus, similar to the way we give the Tamiflu for the influenza. So remdesivir, it has already been approved by the US FDA and by the WHO for time being under emergency use authorization. So this molnupiravir, it can be given orally, but remdesivir should be given intravenously, and it used primarily limited to the clinical studies at later stage of the disease. But molnupiravir you can give us earlier. And Pfizer is also coming with a home pill to treat the COVID, which could be available soon. The drug is a part of class of medicine called protease inhibitors, and it works by inhibiting an enzyme that the virus needs to replicate in human body. So protease inhibitors are used to treat other viral pathogens such as HIV, hepatitis C. So if the clinical trials goes well and the FDA approves, we can expect this drug by the end of 2021. So it will be an oral drug, same like Tamiflu, you can just take it. So you have to remember, all these drugs are still on trial, and we are still looking forward for a definitive treatment. So next question is how to treat the COVID-19 infection. Or before that, what is Delta virus and what is Delta plus virus, the new variant of coronavirus? So it is a version of the coronavirus that has been found in more than 80 countries since it was first detected in India. It got its names from the World Health Organization. So they named as a notable variant after the letters of the Greek alphabet. So that's why it is called as Delta variant. So virus constantly mutate and most changes are not concerning, but there is a worry that some variants might evolve drastically and more contagious. Such a drastic change has happened in the Delta virus because it can it can even involve the vaccine protection. So Delta variant spreads more easily because of the mutations that make it better at latching onto the cells into our bodies. So that's why the Delta virus is important. The COVID-19 Delta plus variant is a subtype of Delta variant, first detected again in India, which has acquired the spike protein mutation, again KF417N. So some scientists worry that the mutation could make it more transmissible, and it is not clear that whether the variant makes the people sicker or deadly. So till now, the Delta plus variant is variant of concern only, but variant of concern is Delta variant, and variant of interest is Delta plus variant. So that's about the Delta and Delta plus variant. So then, okay. So that is the difference between Delta plus and Delta. Now, regarding the treatment of COVID-19 infection, you have to divide every patient into asymptomatic, those who do not have infection, mild symptoms. That means the patient is only having fever, cold, cough, or like loss of smell. Moderate symptoms. Moderate symptoms are patients who are having breathing difficulty and their saturation is low. And severe. Severe is patient's saturation is below 90%. So this is how you classify every COVID-19 patient. And you have to treat accordingly. For example, asymptomatic patient and for mild COVID-19, you have to treat symptomatically only. There is, you have to consider that this COVID-19, you have to treat as the same like upper respiratory tract infection or a fever without complications. So there is no shortness of breath or hypoxia. So what will you do? You have to ask the patient for a home isolation, and you have to ask for physical distancing, indoor masking, hand hygiene to be cleared, symptomatic treatment like paracetamol, give more hydration. And if there is diarrhea, you have to give ORS. Multivitamins can be tried. Stay in contact with the treating physician. Monitor the temperature and the oxygen saturation by applying the pulse oximeter probe to the fingers. So this is how you have to treat a asymptomatic and mild case. So seek immediate medical help if the patient is developing breathing difficulty, or if there is a saturation going below 94%, severe cough, or a low threshold to be kept for in the home. For example, high-risk patient who have dialysis, or those patients we have to keep on the very close monitoring and need to shift the patient to the hospital. In the moderate infection, you have to check for whether the patient is having like symptoms. For example, the patient may have a breathing difficulty or cough, and the saturation going below 94%. Here, the inhalation budesonide, which is given via metered dose inhaler or a dry powder at a dose of 800 microgram BD for 5 days, which is found to be very effective in reducing the cough and the breathing difficulty. Or if it is persisting, if the cough is persisting more than 5 days also, you can consider the budesonide inhaler. Then symptomatic treatment, and the patient whose saturation is down, you have to give oxygen also. You have to make sure the oxygen level is more than 94%. So here in the moderate, okay, the respiratory rate will be more than 24 per minute. The saturation will be below 94, but more than 90%. So 90 to 93, you can say. So oxygen support is a very crucial area. Once the oxygen is down, you have to start with steroids. You have to start with dexamethasone. 6 milligram OD is enough, at least for 10 days. So oxygen, you have to give for patients who are less saturation, and you also ask patient to do proning position. Never should lie down in a same position. Every 2 hours, they have to change their position. Keep it like they have to sleep prone. They have to lie down in left side position, right side position. Other than the dexamethasone, you can use the methylprednisolone also. It's another adjuvant or another option for the patients. So the patients may be intubated or switch to oral route whenever possible, because no need to admit and give these steroids. Then another important treatment maneuver is unfractionated heparin or low molecular weight heparin. So it is given according to the weight. For example, enoxaparin is given 0.5 mg per kg subcutaneously, and it is given for patients who are having high risk for thrombosis. If the D-dimer value is very high and the patient is in a high risk group, for example, immobile, severely fat, or multiple comorbidities are there, then you have to start on this low molecular weight heparin or a oral anticoagulant like rivaroxaban. Then you have to closely monitor this patient whether we have to start or stop this treatment. The treatment of the severe patient, again, here the respiratory rate will be more than 30. The patient will be having breathlessness. The saturation will be less than 90%. That's how you have to identify a severe patient. You have to admit this patient in ICU. You have to give the respiratory support. For example, you have to use non-invasive ventilation like helmet or face mask, depending upon the availability. And the BiPAP is very effective in increasing the oxygen to the alveolus and decreasing the work of breathing. So consider use of high flow nasal cannula in patients with increasing oxygen requirement. You can start with 30 pressure and go up to 60 liter O2. So it should be prioritized with the high risk work of breathing. So if the NIV is not tolerated, you can think about HFNSC. If there is ARDS, you have to follow the ARDS net protocol. That is low tidal volume, increasing the respiratory rate, checking the ABG of the patient, starting the methyl prednisolone that I told 1 to 2 milligram IV in divided doses, or equivalent dose of dexamethasone, which is very crucial in reducing the severe COVID pneumonia. Most of the severe COVID pneumonia needs anticoagulation. You need a prophylactic unfractionated heparin or a low molecular heparin, or a newer anticoagulant like rivaroxaban. So those I have discussed before. So there should not be no contraindication or high risk of bleeding. You have to think about avoiding a blood clot in this patient. Maintain euvolemia. So you have to use dynamic measure for assessing the fluid responsiveness in a patient. And sepsis, you have to always think out. There will be sometimes there will be secondary bacterial infection. So it should be managed with the local biogram. You can take X-ray, chest CT, D-dimer, CRP. These will help you. So remdesivir may be considered only in patients with moderate to severe disease, requiring if there is requiring high amount of oxygen, if there is no renal and hepatic dysfunction, that means EGFR is normal, then you can think about remdesivir. So within 10 days onset of symptoms, you have to start. So recommended dose is 200 milligram IV on the day 1, followed by you can give OD for next 4 days. So not to be used in patients who are not on oxygen support or in home settings. So remdesivir, that is an indication to start remdesivir. Then regarding tocilizumab, so it may be considered if the patients are having a severe interleukin 6, preferably you have to start within 24 to 48 hours with the onset of severe disease or ICU admission. So if the inflammatory markers like IL-6 is very high or CRP is very, very high, then you have to think about this. So if it is not improving use of even with the steroids, and if there is no fungal or bacterial infection, you can think about 4 to 6 milligram per kilogram. That is 400 milligram in 60 kilogram should be given in over 1 hour. This is how tocilizumab is used. So now the prevention of children. Children, COVID-19 can be prevented. Hand washing is the most important preventive method to stop the spread of this infection. So if the virus is living on a child's hand, they can touch their face, they can become infected, and they can spread the infection to other people. So you have to ask your child to wash their hands after blowing their nose, coughing, or sneezing, or after handling their face mask, after leaving a public place, then after touching the animals or pets, after using the restroom, or before and after eating the food, before touching their face. So if the soap and water is not available, you can ask the child to use a hand sanitizer that contains 60% alcohol instead. So most importantly, hand washing is important. Second, you have to ask the child to wear a mask, preferably a surgical mask, and to practice social distancing even if they return to school or activities. So children and all family members should also wear a face mask when they are in a public based on advice from the government. So currently in India, they say that more than 5 years that the mask is recommended, but CDC recommend more than 2 years. So you have to wear mask because it can protect you from getting infected. So you have to ask the child to start wearing at home so that they will get adjusted to it. Otherwise, they will feel difficult when they go to the school. So that is about the wearing a mask. So always you have to keep a backup mask also. You have to keep a extra mask with the child because sometimes the mask is dirty. You have to remove it and put and throw it into the proper dust or a closed wash bin, hand wash, and put in another fresh mask. So as a part of social distancing, you have to make your child remind that they should not share their items like mask, pencil, food, or drinks to other people. Then another important thing is the child should take proper rest. The sleep keeps the body healthy, giving it time to fight off infections and repair of any damage. So it's important to remember that the children need more sleep than adults. So for example, according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, so the children aged 3 to 5 years need to sleep 10 to 13 hours of sleep per day, including the naps. So children between 6 to 12 need 9 to 12 hours of sleep. So teenager need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So help your child to get proper sleep by enforcing an age-appropriate bedtime. So you have to advise, you have to explain why it is so important. So provide them with an environment designed for sleep. So it should be cool, it should be dark, and free of sound of screens. For younger children, a bedtime routine can help them to settle to sleep more easily. So that's regarding the sleep. Now, eating a healthy diet in addition to sleep also will help the child to be healthy. A well-balanced diet full of vitamins and nutrients will be helping the child. A healthy diet can help their body function well and to prevent the disease. Your child's diet should include lean proteins like fish, then chicken, cereals, plenty of fruits and vegetables. Daily you have to include whole grains, low-fat dairy products. So you have to avoid added sugar and sugary beverages, and you have to avoid maida-like foods. Then 5, you have to stay up to date and to the vaccination. Unfortunately, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many families have delayed the routine medical vaccination and medical care. So that should not happen. You have to think about a long-term health effects. So by keeping the proper social distancing and all the preventive strategies, you have to take the regular vaccines. You have to take a medical appointment, and you have to go and give your child the up-to-date vaccines. That is very important because other infections can be prevented. And very soon, the child also will be getting a COVID-19 vaccine. So you have to get in touch with the pediatrician or a doctor, and you have to take the COVID-19 vaccine whenever it is available. Very soon it will be available. Then you have to also address the mental health of your child, because the children may feel very much stressed during this time. They may feel that they are very much anxious about the returning to school, sad about missing their friends, or disappointed about the loss of sports or other activities. You have to check in with your child frequently to see how they are feeling. Very important. You have to watch out for any warning signs of anxiety, such as changes in the sleep, eating, or behavior. So that is very important. We have to, okay. So next important thing, you have to keep the child 6 feet away from others who do not live with them and those who are sick. For example, if they are patient, if somebody is coughing or sneezing, you have to maintain that space. So consider changing travel plans, because travel increases your child's chances of coming in contact with others who may have a COVID-19 infection. So you have to prevent the child from traveling. Unnecessary travels can be cancelled, because you don't know. The home is the best way to protect the your child and others from COVID-19 infection. So avoid travel which is not recommended, and avoid crowded areas, and also don't stay in a closed area. That is another important point, because we don't know if somebody is sneezing or coughing in a closed area and there is no air circulation. So the child, after some time, if the child is coming to that area without the mask, what will happen? He will breathe, or she will breathe that virus, and he will get infected. This is the another important reason for child infection, because they think that there is no one in the room, so why to wear the mask? But most importantly, if it is a common area and if it is a closed area without ventilation, you have to make sure that the child is wearing a proper surgical mask, if possible a double mask, with a surgical mask inside and a cloth mask outside, and ask your child to leave the place, leave the closed space as early as possible, or else you can open up the windows or the door so that the airflow will be there and virus will not stay in the room. Then another important point, most of the important points I have covered. So these are the common questions which I have received. These are the 8 topics which I have received. So if you have any other topics to discuss, you can ask question. So whatever I know, I will try to explain.
Mr. Dhirendra have asked, can COVID affect your side organ? Maybe he's asking about side effects of, after getting COVID, what would be the reactions, or what would be the effects in other organs in a human body?
Yeah, you have
Which organ is mostly affected?
Yeah, you have to understand that COVID-19 infection is a multi-systemic illness, and it can affect all the organs. Most importantly, it affects the lungs. In a mild infection or a asymptomatic infection, it does not infect the other organs. But if it is a moderate or a severe infection, it infects almost all organs. That is a very disappointing fact, because when you check the blood report of a patient who are severely infected, we are very much shocked to see that almost all organs are affected. If you see the ferritin level, it will be high. If you see the LDH level, it is very high. If you see the troponin level, it is very high. If you see the D-dimer level, it is very high. So don't take the COVID-19 infection very lightly, because this moderate and severe infection, it can alter almost all organs. But the fortunate or the good thing in it is most of the thing, like most of these changes in the body will be reversed by around 6 to 8 weeks. So if you give a proper rest to the body for around 6 to 8 weeks, most of the things which we already, which we are saying, like all the infections in the different parts of the body will be healed. The prolonged symptoms are around 20 symptoms are there: headache, joint pain, tiredness, brain fog, then breathlessness. Many are there. Like, so there are 20 post-COVID symptoms. In that, around 17 to 80 will be reversed within 6 to 8 weeks. Very few people will have persisting breathing difficulty or cough, which denotes some sort of lung fibrosis, which cannot be reversed later on if you are not taking care of the post-COVID time. The post-COVID time, you have to do some breathing exercise, which we have explained in Dr. D Better Life. We have done around 800 plus videos in Dr. D Better Life. And Dr. D, you can search in YouTube and Facebook. So there are many videos which we have explained what to do if you are COVID-19 infection, and after the COVID-19 infection, to improve your lung capacity, what all exercise you have to do so that the lung will not go for a fibrotic stage. So that's about the post-COVID infections.
Doctor, the second question, what about their cognition levels, sir? Dr. Shashi have asked.
What about the?
What about their cognition level, sir?
Okay. See, cognition level. See, cognition is what you are oriented to time, place, and person is the cognition. So if they are actually recovered from the COVID-19, there is some cases reported like brain fog is another common problem. But brain fog is, what is brain fog? Brain fog means decisions will be taken little late. For example, if you ask some questions to a person, it will take, he knows the answer, but it is taking some time for him to respond. So the cognition level is normal, but it is called brain fog due to the excessive inflammatory markers in the body. That the brain is taking some time to respond, but it is a reversible thing. It will reverse within 6 to 8 weeks. Just give some, don't concentrate or don't worry about so much about the brain fog. Usually it will be normal with the help of some brain practice or some puzzles or solving some issues. So most of the people or most of the child will be improved with the help of some sort of exercise, brain exercise.
Doctor, next question. Dr. Ranish have asked, sir, what about chest pain post-COVID? How to differentiate it from other?
So chest pain of COVID-19 can be of different varieties. So it can be of 4 varieties, we can say. So it can be due to heart attack. So heart attack means their heart, there are multiple blood vessels for heart. For example, we have right coronary artery and left coronary artery, which we need to flow for continuous working of the heart. If there is any block in the following vessels, the patient will go into heart attack. So what are the signs of heart attack? There will be Levine sign. What is Levine sign? The patient will not be able to point where is the pain, but instead he will tell that the pain is like this, a fist keeping over the chest. That means it is somewhere here. So that is called Levine sign. The patient is holding like this. Another important point is the patient pain will be very severe and he will feel that it can be a squeezing pain, like squeezing pain or something kept on the chest. For example, a teapot or a pot kept on your chest. You feel like something heaviness in the chest. You feel like something is kept on your chest. So that is another form of symptoms. And another important point to differentiate between the cardiac chest pain is the pain will last more than 30 seconds. It will last more than 20 seconds. Usually, if the pleuritic chest pain or the costochondral pain or the acidity pain, it will last only for a few seconds, like 3 to 4 seconds. But the chest pain, the classical cardiac chest pain will last more than 20 seconds and it can last up to 20 minutes. Another important point is the patient will have resting pain. For example, the pleuritic chest pain or the costochondral pain, it will not be there when you take rest. But the cardiac chest pain will be there even if you take rest. So that is how you can differentiate between the cardiac chest pain. And the cardiac chest pain, you know, that it will radiate to the jaw, it will radiate to the left arm. So these are how you can differentiate between the cardiac chest pain. And so always you do an ECG and a troponin, because the ECG will not give a clear picture of whether this patient have a MA or not. And regarding the pleuritic chest pain or the lung or the pneumonia chest pain, the patient will have chest pain when they are taking a deep inhalation. For example, if I am taking a deep inhalation, at the end of my breath, if the patient is holding the breath or having pain, that is called as pleuritic chest pain. So you have to treat accordingly with the pulmonary cause. Then about the costochondral or a musculoskeletal pain, you can differentiate with the help of Kroin-Boster phenomenon. The Kroin-Boster maneuver is ask the patient to keep the hands like this. So keep it over the head, hold like this, neck, okay, hold above the neck. and you have to make the like both elbow joint upwards and outwards, upwards and outwards. You have to pull it upwards and outwards. If the patient is having any pain over the chest, it is called as costochondral pain. So costochondral pain, you can otherwise differentiate by pressing over the costochondral area, the patient will have pain. So in that case, you have to just give some NSAIDs and give some local painkiller to apply. So it will reduce. And another important cause is acidity related. So acidity, the patient will have some relation with the food, and he will be having previous episodes like that, and it will be associated with heartburn. So this is how you have to differentiate between different types of chest pain.
Okay,
Any other
doctor.
question?
Yeah, next question by Dr. Bhagavi. In first wave, some studies showed viral infection led further to infertility in male only. A note on this, if any more info.
Can you ask the question again? It's not clear.
Yeah. Some studies showed viral infection lead further to infertility in male only. A note on this. So I think doctor wanted to know COVID and infertility in male, or is it only infertility happens in male, or even a female also can be affected?
Okay, there are no studies to prove that the COVID-19 causes infertility. So we know a virus which causes infertility, that is mumps. So mumps affect the testicles, and it affects the mainly the male reproductive organ, and it causes infertility. But COVID-19 infection till now have not proven to cause infertility. So we also have not seen any cases like that. So we have to wait for the further studies. But as far as I know, I don't think there is a clear-cut cause for infertility.
Okay, doctor. And one question, anonymous attendee. Okay, sir, which are the post-COVID complications reported in children?
See, most importantly, the post-COVID symptoms in children, it is categorized under multi-inflammatory syndrome in children, otherwise called as MISC, M-I-S-C. So it is same like Kawasaki syndrome. So what is Kawasaki? So Kawasaki means it is again a multi-systemic illness. It involves the heart, it is an autoimmune disorder. So the patient will have multiple symptoms like breathing difficulty. The child will have multiple symptoms like breathing difficulty. The child tongue will be having tongue will be losing the skin and will be red in color. There will be some increased heart rate. The child will be having severe abdominal pain and vomiting. So these are some of the symptoms of multi-inflammatory syndrome in children, which is very dangerous, which we have to find out in a post-COVID-19 recovered in child. But other COVID-19 post-infections are headache, post-viral fatigue, very common among the child. It lasts around 2 months. So you have to supplement with vitamins. You have to hydrate the baby very well, and you have to give fruits and vegetables continuously. Ask the baby to sleep more. So these are some of the recommendations for reducing the fatigue. And also some sort of exercise is important. You have to do minimum 15 to 20 minutes of exercise, which involve every joint. So like walking, running, some sort of mild exercise, not very severe. So those will help to relieve this fatigue, and most commonly the patient will be relieved of this post-COVID infection.
Okay, doctor. The other question is from Pratyusha. Good evening. There have been articles stating a single dose of vaccine is enough for post-COVID patients, and for the patient to wait 3 months before getting vaccinated. Do these have merit? Is the waiting period only because of post-COVID immunity developed, or does it have a more problematic result? Are there any side effects?
Okay, very important question. So here there are two questions. One question is, After the post-COVID infection, in severe symptomatic patient, we have discussed it before. In severe symptomatic patients, there will be COVID antibodies, which will last around 8 months, which we have studied. But in mild infection or asymptomatic patient who are just COVID positive, they don't have enough antibody to cover a secondary or second infection. So we need to take a COVID vaccine as early as possible. The current guidelines in India suggest that we have to wait for 3 months because there is an acute vaccine shortage as well. But throughout the world, it is given for the asymptomatic and mild cases, the COVID vaccine is given immediately after 1 month of infection. And for severe COVID infection, it is given after 3 months or 6 months, depending upon the oxygen requirement, all those things. And if the patient is already have COVID antibodies from the natural infection, if you are giving a vaccine, there is no harm. It will only boost up the immune response. So I hope I answered both questions.
Yes, doctor. And there is one question from Dr. Sayan Bhattacharya. Doctor is asking, what is happy hypoxia? Can COVID aggravate diabetics mellitus? Are children more susceptible to Delta plus variant?
There are 3 questions now. First question is, what is hypoxia? See, I have explained in detail regarding this in Dr. D. Butterlife. So you can see in that, but I will just give a 1 minute highlight on that. So happy hypoxia means usually when you get hypoxia, that means decrease in oxygen, what will happen? The body will show some symptoms like breathing difficulty, tachypnea, that means increased in respiratory rate, involvement of other respiratory muscles like sternocleidomastoid, the intercostal muscles. There will be involvement. You can see that the patient is struggling for breath. But unfortunately, in COVID-19, even if the saturation is falling, we will not get these type of warning symptoms because the COVID-19 is affecting those receptors also. The receptors which show us the symptoms. So there will not be any symptoms. The patient will be having less oxygen saturation and he will die without knowing that his oxygen is going down. So how to avoid this? You can give a pulse oximeter and monitor the oxygen level. If the saturation is going below 94% in a normal individual who have a oxygen saturation more than 94 usually, you have to immediately go to the hospital and take the appropriate treatment. So that's about happy hypoxia. So second question is regarding diabetes mellitus. Post-COVID infection, some people are developing diabetes because they are pre-diabetes which are non-detected. And due to steroids and as I told, is a multi-systemic illness. So there will be multi-infections. So 1% of the individuals are developing diabetes. So, but you have to understand, most of the diabetes can be reversed with the help of lifestyle activities, or you can just modify your lifestyle and can reverse it because it is due to an illness. And second, some patients who are already having diabetes, if they are getting COVID-19, the sugars will flare up due to multiple reasons. When there is an infection, the sugar will rise. That is the first thing. And we are using some drugs like steroids to end the infection. So to control the infection. So steroids also will increase the sugar. So you have to monitor closely in a diabetic patient whether the diabetes is being controlled with the medicines which they are taking. If the medicines is not enough, you have to expedite to the other medicine. For example, you have to change to insulin, you have to add on other medicines, because in COVID-19 infection, the sugar should be less than 200 milligram per deciliter at any cost. You have to make it below 200. If you are keeping it below 200, the chances of recovery is very, very high. And third question is regarding child. So child Delta virus is not that transmissible. Delta virus as such, it is more spreading, and because the previous COVID-19, it was infecting only 2 people. Now it is infecting more than 8 people. 1 person can infect 8 to 10 people. So the transmissible, the rate is increased. But if the person is vaccinated or if the person is immune, they are protected. So who is not immune and who is not vaccinated? The children are not vaccinated and children does not have the protection. So the children can get infection. But fortunately, due to multiple reasons, the COVID-19 infection in children till now is safe because of the COVID-19 receptors are less in children, especially in the lungs, and the T lymphocytes in the children are quite higher than the adults. So these are the two reasons why the COVID-19 infection in children are relatively lesser.
Okay, doctor. How many minutes we have, doctor? Because we have so many questions. So you can tell us like how many
Yeah, you
questions.
can ask some relevant questions, no problem, because I'm here to address the. We'll try to answer
Okay,
some
there have been
questions.
questions asking regarding vaccination. Like, is it safe? Can lactating mothers can take vaccination? So can you just touch upon a brief about vaccination and how important is vaccination today?
Okay, see, almost all vaccines are given to the lactating mothers now. It is considered to be safe. From last 4 months, the lactating mothers are given COVID-19 vaccines. So you can ask the patients to take COVID-19 vaccine even if they are lactating. Pregnant ladies trials have not yet published, but the Pfizer and Moderna, the mRNA vaccines, have already started giving to the pregnant women also. And they have also, the Pfizer and Moderna have also started for the child above 12 years. For the child above 3 years, the killed vaccines like Sinopharm are being given right now, especially in countries like UAE. It is considered to be safe and is given. So these are the latest updates. And which vaccine is more safe? We cannot say that. Every vaccine has its own advantages and some disadvantages. For example, the killed vaccine is more considered to be more safe and but less antibody producing vaccine. For example, the Sinopharm and all, the antibody produced from the Sinopharm is quite lesser than the antibody produced from other vaccine. So that is a good thing and the bad thing. But the mRNA vaccine is a new form of technology and it covers even the Delta virus. That's what they claim. And it is found to be more beneficial. So these are the other advantages of the mRNA vaccine. So there are some disadvantages of mRNA vaccine as well. So rarely, very rarely, like in 1 lakh, one person can develop myocarditis. So about the Covishield or the AstraZeneca, in about when you take the 1 lakh or 2 lakh people, one person may get clots. That's a rarest complication. So this you have to know. You have to weigh up the advantages and disadvantages, and you have to choose wisely. But most importantly, whichever vaccine available, better to take it, because there is an acute shortage of vaccine everywhere in the world. There are many countries which have zero vaccine. So if possible, try to take vaccine as early as possible, whichever available, because there are two reasons. One, the COVID-19 virus is spreading very fast because the transmissible rate is very high. It's very fast it is spreading. We can see even our friends, relatives are getting infected. So it can come to you also. So better to take vaccine as early as possible. The second important reason is you have to start living, because you cannot stay at home for maybe 2 years or 3 years. You have to start living. So for start living, you have to have at least some protection against this infection, because we can see it clearly that those who have vaccinated, the COVID-19 infection and the severity of infection is very less. But those who are not vaccinated, the severity is highly dangerous and some patients are dying because of the COVID-19 virus.
Thank you, doctor. And we have a couple of HR, human resource professionals have joined from manufacturing and automobile companies. So they have this one particular doubt, like when they can start like calling their employees to their facilities. In case if they are starting their manufacturing operations, what would be your suggestions and input so that the work can be done smoothly and the infection level also can be reduced?
See, currently India is aiming for vaccination like 100 crore people by the end of 2021. But we are only now in the like 6th month of this year. So what you have to know is you have to change according to the situation. We have to start allocating or calling back the employees at least 40% right now, because it depending upon again the total positivity rate of the area. If the total positivity rate is between 5 to 10, you can call back 40%. If the total positivity rate is more than 10%, that means it is more infected, you can call at least 20% of your employees. And if it is less than 5%, the total positivity rate, then you can call more than 60% of your of your employees. And most importantly, you have to create an environment to work for these people. For example, you have to open up the windows, or you have to make sure that there is an enough amount of airflow when they work, and there is enough amount of space between each people. And also there is a huge gap between the lunch break. For example, usually we will keep 1:30 to 2 p.m. as a lunch break. Don't keep like that. You keep it, start from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. 12 to 12:15, two people can go for lunch. If it is in the same area, 12:15 to 12:30, another group of people can go, because there we used to remove the mask and speak, or when we have food, there is a high chance for getting infected. And other important thing which nobody is addressing is increasing the time of work. For example, usually we will work only from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So what I am suggesting is you have to increase from like 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. or like 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Increase the work of time. And the advantage of that is you can have shifts. For example, 20% of the people can come at the morning shift and 20% can come at the evening shift, and 20% you can keep as a backup. But in case if they are getting infected, and tell them clearly that if they are having a fever, cold, or sneezing, loss of smell, diarrhea, you have to inform the manager and give them sick leave with at least half payment. Otherwise, they will not tell you the truth. They will keep it high, like they will not tell you the truth. They will take a paracetamol and come to the factory, and they will spread the infection. And make sure all these employees are getting vaccinated as early as possible. Try to give vaccination, whichever available vaccine, try to give in as early as possible, even the second dose, not first dose, even the 2 doses. So that is important. And cleaning up the areas which were common areas, you can clean every 1 hour or something. And make sure somebody is allocated to check the infection control practices are going on. For example, a person can be allocated from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. So he will walk around and he will check whether the persons are wearing the mask properly, including the surgical mask, whether they are disposing the mask properly, whether they are touching everything correctly. And whenever they find anything problematic, they have to report directly to the manager and act accordingly. So you can keep some scores who maintain a good hygiene and maintaining everything correctly. So something like this you can make as a quality marker in your industry, so that your company will work smoothly. Just imagine, recently I contacted a very big company for a pulse oximeter, and the factory is closed because 30% of the people are infected. So you have to plan accordingly. Otherwise, if there will be some financial loss, or there will be some loss will be there. For example, stretching the time period from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., there is actually a financial loss. But think about closing the factory for 3 months. It is very difficult. So better plan something differently. Plan such a way that you have to work for this like 1 year or 2 years till this pandemic is over. So like that, you have to plan accordingly. There are further more instructions which I have shared in Dr. D Better Life.
Doctor, we have crossed 1 hour, so maybe can we have a little more time to take questions, or maybe we'll take it up offline. Maybe I can send it to you.
Yeah, I will suggest another option. You can note down my WhatsApp number. So whoever having doubts can message in that, or you can share to Soumya. WhatsApp number is 9495 365 247. 9495 365 247. So you can WhatsApp all your doubts, and my team are there. Around 35 doctors are there, so they will answer the questions. And if it is if needed to be addressed by a doctor, you will have a like face-to-face interview also. So we are trying our level best to contain this pandemic. So I thank the MedPaper Technology to giving me an opportunity to speak here, and please spread this awareness program. Try to teach other people how to prevent this infection.
Thank you, doctor. Thank you so much for your time, and you have explained, end to end, details regarding COVID-19 prevention, how to use mask properly, what all the infections we have to reduce, and everything. Thank you so much, and thank you all the participants for being here for a long time. Doctor, your now. All the participants will be given the certificates accordingly, and please follow us so that we'll be updated you with upcoming medical and scientific webinars. Thank you, Dr. Danish Salim. Looking forward for more interactions and more scientific webinars like this. Thank you, doctor.
Sure, Swami. Take care. Thank you.